everyone, and welcome to Healing Trauma Down Under. It is my great pleasure to introduce a great friend and like a soul journeyer really onto the show. This is Mel Armstrong. She is a proud First Nations Gomeroi. Did I say that right? Gomeroi.
Yeah.
Gomeroi woman living in the Hunter region of New South Wales, Australia. She is a healer, a mentor, an advocate, and international best-selling author. She brings a wealth of spiritual knowledge and practical experience in helping people heal. With 15 years in the mental health and wellness industry and undertaking the same time frame of spiritual tuition. So Mel's passion has always been advocacy, supporting people to find their voice, to be heard and validated. And she employs a strengths-based approach towards trauma care, cultural safety, inclusion practice, understanding diversity, wellness, mental health, healing recovery, and the integration of change. But I feel like you're also so much more than that. So hopefully some of that will come out in our conversation today.
Thank you, Jen. Great to be here. It's great to meet you too, Yemi. Thank you so much.
Likewise, really excited to know more. And you might see me scribbling here. It's because I want my brain to hold everything you're saying. So thank you for saying yes.
No worries.
Okay, so shall we start off with kind of what's your when you hear the word trauma, or you think about kind of your own experiences, or maybe personal or cultural or transpersonal experiences, like what kind of comes up for you with the word trauma?
Sorry to jump in. If it's okay, could I just do a quick acknowledgement of country?
Yes.
Sorry, I forgot to mention before we started. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, our First Nations people, and where I'm sitting is the Awabakal. I'd also like to acknowledge my elders, past, present and emerging as well, which is the Gomeroi Nation, the Dunghutti and the Underwan. And to all others who are present here, we acknowledge your ancestors, past, present and emerging with their elders, and we welcome everyone here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I acknowledge the Gadigal people on whose land I sit.
I acknowledge the Dark and Young people on the land I sit.
Thank you.
Oh, that's nice, isn't it? So important.
I could really feel it. It was like, oh, I need to do this. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So I would begin. Trauma. What's your view on trauma? What comes to mind? Your teachings, your learnings.
I guess realistically for me, trauma is the same with everybody. Doesn't matter where we come from or what it is. It's the same, whether it's viewed as less than or not. It's exactly the same because your body experiences what it experiences. It's our mind that makes it less than or more than somebody else's. I feel like it's a misconception. That person's more traumatized. Well, how do you know? They might not view it as that. But it really is, it's an ongoing challenge I've found in my life for various reasons. And professionally as well, I've had a massive interest in understanding people where they're at with their perception of trauma and how they feel about how they're judged by that. And that's kind of usually where I start if I'm working with someone as a client. I want to understand their fears around their trauma or their perception around that. And generally it can take months to get that from them, depending on where you're working, if it's a therapeutic relationship or if it's more of a community role in an organisation. A lot of my clients have had massive trauma, and they've felt that they're going to be judged no matter what they say. So they only give you a third of what they actually have to give because they've done it before, they've said it before, and here we go again. And they're in this systemic mess that isn't actually about healing, it's about management. It's a Band-Aid solution. Yes, I find it challenging in that way. And another way I find it empowering, because what I've seen of people who embrace all of it, they understand that they're shiny as well. They're not that identity. They're actually this amazing human who's been stuck in a place that they haven't been able to get out of. So, yeah, it's a vast subject, isn't it?
It is. Do you mind if I ask, when people come to you, do they know that what they experienced or still experiencing is trauma, has been traumatic, or do they only realise and acknowledge the trauma when they speak to you with the wisdom and knowledge you have?
I think it depends. Some of them will say I'm in my trauma, I'm in a trauma response, and they understand the language, but they don't understand what it is because they can't feel it. And others don't see they're in trauma or experiencing trauma, because then that means it's mental health. No, that's not right.
Yeah.
No, I'm just triggered. Okay. So it really is trying to understand their value system and where they're from and what it is for them, and work with their language rather than what I think. I mean, I'm an observer. I'm their guide. I'm not their answer.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you experience a lot of sort of fear in that mental health field around people naming, I might have trauma or I might have any kind of mental health issue. Do you find that
every time?
And what do you think that fear is? Because I mean, it's out there, isn't it? Sort of the mental health stigma. People talk about that. So what do you think?
Yeah. It is the stigma, and it is the separation, because you're already a little disconnected anyway. So because you're in that disconnection, it's more disconnection if you own up to not being normal, or then you're not functioning as you could be, or, you know, they're not going to, my capacity will be less than because I've disclosed this and I've been vulnerable. So it is about where they're going to sit. Like, am I going to sit here with everybody else, or am I going to be not validated? My perspective won't be valid because of the lens I'm seeing through. It's really vast, and I find it fascinating and really heartbreaking at times, because I've seen some amazing humans and they just can't see what they have because they're in this loop of trying to be whatever they perceive others need them to be.
And when you were talking about the Band-Aid verse, what was it verse? Kind of, is it the Band-Aid?
It was management versus healing is what I wrote down. Was that right? So you said the Band-Aid was the management as opposed to the healing.
Yeah.
That got me as well. So, yeah, I'm interested in your question, Jen.
Yeah. Well, really, it's kind of like, so you get in the mainstream world, I'm not knocking it because there's some phenomenal things that go on, but the basis of it is, there's your 10 sessions and you go and get your treatment plan, and in you go. And you've got to go through the different therapists, like everybody, depending on what modalities and stuff. But this is how you do it. And you have 10 sessions. And this is the way they want you to work. And it's often the therapist will do what they think rather than hear what the client says. And the client just does it because they have to do a certain thing to get to a certain point. And they could be in therapy for years. And I've seen some come out amazing, and some are more traumatized by it because they cannot work on the thing that they need. That therapist doesn't do that. Or they use a different language, which isn't recovery focused. It's more about pinpointing and diagnosing. Well, we can all outline a problem. That's not hard. We can see what's wrong with something. To help someone see what's right with it and to nurture it and work with it is a different approach. And it's not always a mainstream way.
Is that what you refer to as the strength-based? I've heard that before, and where you're looking at what are the benefits as opposed to the downside. Can you give a bit more information on what, when we heard your bio, it's like there's a strength-based focus. Can you tell us a bit more?
Well, I guess really, I want to know the strengths. It's like when you go for an interview and they say, tell me about yourself. And you go, I don't know, I like pink. And so people don't know what their strengths are sometimes because you're focusing on what you've got to fix rather than what you have that brings you forward to here. So someone who's left like, what's an example? So there's so many. So I worked with a lady who left a DV situation and she was broken, she was shattered, she was in a hot mess. Beautiful woman. At that point, she was just devastated. She couldn't see her strengths. So we worked with her strengths and identified what she was doing well. We didn't not talk about the other stuff because that's important to validate that. That's just as real as the other. But it's not one is more important than the other. You're focusing on all the broken and that's where they sit. But when it's like a balance, like, yes, this is happening and you work with that and then you leave it on a strength-based note. So, you know, like you've come through this and you're safe now. And today we've got food on the table and somewhere to sleep. And we look at what's going well and how we can help manage the emotional response to the other. So it is both like a balance because they're both valid. But the strength is what is getting them through, not the depression. not the mental health, not the addiction. And that's what we talk about, not the other.
Yeah.
And also what's under that, your pain, your anguish, your distress, your disconnection. It's like they're brave conversations and not everyone can have them.
Wow.
And with every trauma survivor, everyone who's experienced trauma, ultimately they're still alive. So often there's just strength in the fact that they're still alive and having the conversation, you know, and that's not to say the people who are not still alive are weak at all, but that's a way to kind of find strengths, isn't it? Like, how did you survive that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let them tell what they want to tell rather than asking them what we think we need to know. Like what's important for us to hear. And you could sit in silence for half an hour.
Yes.
Most uncomfortable. However, you get better at it. The first time I was no good at it. I was terrible.
And what, sitting in the silence as a practitioner or as someone telling their story?
No, sitting in the silence as a practitioner and going out. So I'd often go out. I worked, one of the roles I worked was an outreach role, and I was based in a homeless shelter, and we would go out with people. And I was used to a lot of yelling and violence and noise, and I was fine with that. Put me in the silence with somebody's pain, and that's a whole different ball game. And they can't talk to you when they're curled up in a ball. And it's like, what am I going to do with this? And it wasn't for me to do anything. It was for me to learn to manage my response and whatever and hold the space. So it was a great teaching. And that woman was amazing. She went on to build a home. She got a job. She went back to uni. Phenomenal. So she taught me probably more than I did for her, I think.
So hearing, and this is what I love about having the various guests, is that I literally leave every conversation with a different perspective. I feel like I'm telling myself a story from what you're saying, that the person who comes in to do the work and to do the healing almost knows what they need. And if the practitioner, I guess, was comfortable with the silence, they might be able to hear how best to support that person. It's almost like there's an empowerment of the person. Am I here? Because I have this tendency to I hear my messages from what someone's saying. I just need to make sure I'm not really hallucinating. Is that fair to say that we have the knowledge and the healing of our own trauma? We just look to the practitioner to kind of hold the space and navigate us through.
Yeah, that's been my experience professionally, but also personally. Oh, there's some feedback. Sorry. So I find that when I've had sessions with other therapists as well, for myself, that I've felt that I haven't known, but the therapist holding the space, like they're generally quite a strong therapist, otherwise I can't go, will hold the space. And it's amazing what comes from you when someone can bear witness like that. And it brings out, you really have to be brave to sit with that, your own stuff.
Yeah.
That you do know, because your mind is so busy. So being still and being quiet and with someone like that, yeah, absolutely.
So I wonder if it's okay to kind of shift the conversation a little bit, because I'm super curious about some of your experiences with your ancestors, and as you've started to kind of reconnect with your ancestors, sort of, I guess, what am I asking? Yeah, I guess kind of whatever comes up for you around that, or whatever you feel that you'd like to share around the topic of trauma.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just try and do it really briefly with the backstory. So it was, I grew up as a white girl. I didn't feel that. I felt quite weird all of the time, which is okay. Nan told us that we were Chinese, and Nan looks quite Asian in her appearance. So I didn't really think anything of it. Her cousins, she said she only had 4 cousins. I didn't live with my mother. It was an on and off thing. So I met her cousins, and 2 of the fellows were really dark and 2 of the ladies were really fair. And she said they were from New Zealand. We've never left the country. Like, I was a kid, I didn't know. So as it went on further and further, things were odd and stuff happens. I was about 20, I think I was around 22, and Nan was stomping around one day and she was just really cranky. And she'd been to a funeral, And someone approached her and said, "You look like someone I know. Do you know Bill Kim?" And she said, "Oh, that's my father." She said, "I need you to meet this person," which was her niece. So then the can of worms were open, the secrets were out, and Nan had all these siblings, and we have hundreds of family that we didn't know about. So it's been a 25-year journey to reconnect. And Nan only admitted her Aboriginality probably 2 or 3 years ago herself, and she's 89 now. So it's been a 25-year run for me to try to get to this part where I can have my identity back.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been difficult. So I could never understand why this was a thing. I didn't, because I'm pretty out there. Anything that you're not meant to do, I'm happy to give it a crack. It's like, why can't you do that? I know. It's funny now, but when you're a kid, they don't find it as amusing as you think. So, yeah, this end of the age is good. But it was always the but why game. But why is that like that? I don't understand. And I often did think growing up that my grandmother just didn't like me. And there was this tension all of the time, and there was this fear and anxiety, and everything was anxious. She was very loving and caring and nurturing. I had everything I needed. I never went hungry. I had a beautiful bedroom. Like, I had all of my stuff. But then you can have all of that thing, but your heart's not okay. So then when that happened, and I spoke to my cousins and we got to know each other, and it's great. Like, they're a lot older than me in my mum's generation. So they're saying, no, you are Aboriginal. I was like, I'm not. She said, we're not, because it's half sisters, and that can happen, that one is and one isn't. And I just couldn't bring myself to identify, even though my family is saying you are. So I can't prove it. There was a little gap that was missing. And as Nan got more and more unwell over time, we needed an assessment for her for ACAT. And the assessor gave her a little poke doing the assessment, and Nan lost it completely, really cranky. Don't call me Aboriginal, I'm not that. And she was fuming. I'd never seen her so cranky about it. And the lady eventually circled back and said, okay, well, can you tell me which one of your parents were Aboriginal? And Nan just said they both were. And it was profound. I didn't know that. I was bawling my eyes out. I was meant to be there supporting her in the assessment, and I was just a hot mess. It's like, holy crap. Like, how is this happening? So literally everything just went to a spin from there.
I can feel it.
So it just made me more determined. Yeah, you can feel it. Like, I'm just taking a sec. And it's fine. Like, but it's how it is. Like, in a lot of ways, I guess we had it easier in a lot of ways than some of my other family. And my other family was stolen. They were taken off the missions. My cousins, who I'm connected, they're still here. So it's a hard topic. It's tricky. So for Nan, then we had other cousins that we wanted to meet, and Nan was very much keeping people at arm's length, and she knew she wasn't 100%. Her memory was a bit shot. She's doing pretty well. Like, she's still here and she's going, and she's softened, and I'll tell you why in a sec. So I went and met the other family, and everyone looks the same. And you just meet them and you cry. Like, I cry. They don't all cry, but I'm just messy. I think the hormones don't help at this age. But to see, it's like seeing you looking back at you.
Wow.
It's like, how is this happening?
Yeah.
How are these people here? And I think with one of them, I met another one last year, and I just stood in front of him and I could feel pieces coming back into my body, like pieces of energy. You could just feel your heart get bigger, and you can't talk. And it's like, oh my God, how is this? Like, you can feel more connected with your culture. The connection with country just expands more and more.
Yeah.
And then Nan started to meet the family. On her 88th birthday, she met her nieces, and my cousins met. So 2 of them were in their 70s, first cousins, never met before. And that was Nan's 88th birthday. Then we took Nan back to country, and it's like, right, we've got to get her home. And she didn't want to go. And we're just having a coffee one day, and I kept pumping her because I'm pretty determined like that. Little sneaky photos. Oh, look at this, Nan. She goes, I used to go there. Great. Just kept it going. And then one day she just blurted, I want to go home. Oh, my God. So I'm on the phone, quick, while she's on there, let's do it. And we're all just howling, and there's always lots of tears with me. Thank God my cousins are patient because I cry all the time in a good way. But we got her home, first time on country since she was 6. Yeah, the full ceremony. We were welcomed back in language where her sister lived on the campsite there in Tamworth. So we all, the 3 sisters, there was Nan, her sister Betty and her sister Ella. So the 3 families, someone from every family was there. And some of the cousins who were taken away came back, and they'd never had ochre on. They'd never been spoken to in language. They hadn't gone through the ceremony. So it was a really big emotional weekend. Yeah. Yeah, so then we went up and we did a road trip and visited the old mission where Nan's granny used to be. And we found that was in a book, like our family was written in a book about the Indigenous people up there. And then our family were found in a cemetery up in Walker in the Aboriginal segregated section is where we found her grandmother and the aunties. So it was all separate. And we took Nan to the grave. Oh, my goodness. Wow. So she came home. It was a lot, but she came home different. And she's been different ever since. There's a soft...
How was that she went back home?
A year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's been a really busy time. But the difference in her now, because her mind, she can't hold certain things because of the dementia. So in a way, it's been a gift that we've been able to keep her at home and support her to reconnect with this and her identity before she goes. Very powerful. And there's a lot of healing in the family where there has been trauma and fear and you can't be who you are. A lot of it's just slipped away now because the cultural connection is there. It's open. It's not a secret. And it's not about Aboriginal people are this, which is what she was told as a child. They were beaten badly for being black. They were just beaten. And her brother was very dark. I think Auntie Betty had quite dark skin. I think Auntie Ella did too when she was younger. So we're kind of like a mixed bunch. But Nan, being a little bit fairer, she decided to not identify just as the Chinese lineage. And she actually said, you'd still cop it, but it was nowhere as bad. And that's why she did it. So we were kept completely separate from that all the way through. So a lot has come through with Nan. It's given me more compassion, and I'm so determined to keep the culture alive in the family.
More compassion for who? Sorry, more compassion for who or what?
For Nan and for all of us. I could never understand. I was a bit judgy about why we're all so tense and like it just didn't click. Where now there's a cohesion that wasn't there. So it's a deeper understanding as to why there's separateness. Because if you can't connect, how can you be with someone fully if you can't connect with yourself or you can't connect with your culture, or it is a disconnect and you're displaced. So it has made vast difference. It's cost me a few friends. It's cost me a few colleagues. It's cost me a job.
How so, if you don't mind? I mean, if you feel open to share here, if you don't, absolutely fine.
No, that's fine. Not everyone... Look, it's confronting when they know you as one thing and then you take on an identity as something else and all the grief comes with it. It's not a free ride.
Yeah.
And you have to go through it and you manage it as best you can, which isn't always great. You can always do better, but when you're in it, sometimes that's the best you can manage. So I found a lot of information about the family. I found a lot of paperwork that I'd never seen before. And when you can feel it, like if you're an empath, you feel it anyway, but when that's your people, your immediate people, you feel it. You can't not. So there was a lot of grief with that, which then you're a bit defensive and you're tired and you're depleted. And you've really become acutely aware of what's happening in your surroundings, what your own perceptions have been. So you've got to do your shadow work, let's face it. You've always got to do your own work. But then the people around you don't want to make an adjustment. Yeah. So it's either eggshells or that's, I think one person said to me, you've been black for 5 minutes and you think you know it all.
Aye.
I went, oh my God, what do you say to that? Someone else said, you've never really done anything, so why would we ask you? It's like, why don't you ask an Indigenous person about Indigenous things instead of Googling it and coming back and saying these things? And I just pull people up and they're not cool with it. They tell you about statistics and what they've read, and it's like, oh my God. I see through the lens of this. It's not like I'm reading it and reading it back to you. This is the lens that I have. And it's, why are you not valuing that as wisdom rather than knowledge? It's unbelievable. There's some friends I've had to step right away from because it was just too difficult to be around them. I found a lot of people, the ones I've had the most problem with, who I spend the most time with, are either spiritual people or mainstream professionals. And it's like, oh gosh, that's my playground. A lot of entitlement about what people think they should know and what they should have access to and adopt as their own. And I don't think it's necessarily bad, because we all do that with different things that we like and we go and learn it. But it is the way it's approached. And the biggest thing I have an issue with is a reverence to the culture. And I won't apologise for that, because I can see my grandmother, I can see my mother, like my cousins, and they don't see that. Sorry.
Just take a minute. I so resonate, Mel, with what you're saying about that kind of growing up. Like, I have such a strong image of you kind of growing up being told something that just wasn't true and it never feeling right. Because I know for myself, like I knew half of my family. Those were the people I knew, and they were, they lived in the same town their whole life. My great-grandparents had grown up in the same town. It was very samey. And I just felt like, I just don't resonate with these people. I just feel like, who are my people? And I had this sense of not fitting in with my family. So I can only imagine that for you, it was sort of ramped up, even more. And I didn't get to meet my other side, but what I did do is I sat down and I wrote down what I did know about them. And they were they owned a fairground back in the early, 1905. They owned like a huge fairground. They were traveling around. They were, my dad grew up on a horse and cart, basically, traveling around Northern England. And it was kind of like, oh, there are my people. Like, that's where I fit in. And it was like through that line, I could find me. I always wanted to go traveling. I wanted to go, and I loved... I could feel me there, and strong women through that side. My great aunt owned that fair, which in those days would have just been unheard of. So I remember just having that insight without actually meeting those people and feeling like I found part of me. So when I hear your story, I just go, oh my goodness, it must have been like that, but just so much bigger, like click, 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 click. And this sense of, for me, it was a sense of kind of fitting into a jigsaw, whereas before I felt like a piece that was like to the side that didn't slot in. I don't know, did it feel like that for you? Or
every day was, I think it's the same, like, I don't mean that disrespectfully to anyone, but I feel like that's the same. And that's something that as people, if we all close our eyes and like, you're there and you're people, like we're the same. So that displacement is the same thing. And if we can remember that, it's like, wow. Clearly there's a lot going on with the Aboriginal community in Torres Strait Islander with what happened in Australia, with the history, of course. We're not taking that away. But the disconnection and the where do I come from, it's the same for us all. We all breathe, we all eat, we all sleep. Not as much as I'd like. But, it's the same thing. And when you find it, you feel a little bit more complete in that. It's like, geez, that makes sense. There's actually nothing really wrong with me. I'm just displaced.
If I can share, and I don't know how it's going to come out, so we might need to edit this out or not, because it just, as you were speaking, there was lots of emotion. And, the work I'm doing on trauma, I've gotten really comfortable just trying to figure out what my body's doing. And I found myself tears welling up and then coming down, because the story sounds very familiar to Black people, African Americans, however you want to describe yourself. And then my brain starts to say, but this is in real time, because Mel's sitting here and she's telling a story of people who are living now. And we haven't even heard the stories that are still happening with Indigenous people on this land. Like I don't believe for a second we even know what really is happening to generations now. And I'm thinking, are we just watching history repeat itself? And then I hear Jen share parts of her story, and then it just feels like we are all displaced. And I know I still struggle with the concept of, can you have a trauma who's bigger than someone else's? But you very eloquently explained that it's all the same thing to all of us. It's just how we respond to it. Is trauma, therefore, just this major displacement that has huge effects at varying levels to different people? And therefore, part of the healing is that reconnection, is that jigsaw puzzle. Like I said, there's no form, there's no question. I just don't understand how we are still here. I mean, you made reference to your gran, and they've started showing stuff on Netflix of African Americans who would be considered as white passing. You know, there's an actual film documentary of a woman who did that because that was the only way to survive and to live. And that gave me empathy for those who say had fairer skin to me and appeared, because it really much has appeared. You can't be living a really fulfilling life if you're having to pass as something you don't really identify with. And so it's been, really interesting to hear you share this story. And I'm so grateful, because you've definitely given me some things I want to go think about. So no question, but just lots of thoughts there.
I love it. Please don't edit that out.
Yeah, wow.
Because and I think, isn't it? And there is a lot of fear. It doesn't matter where we sit. There's a lot of fear. I found I've some friends, I've been very blessed to have some really beautiful people. And it's a mixed bag, and I love that, because it's people who just connect, and we're just mates, and we can be, we have our differences, but that's cool too, because there's more love than disrespect. There's more love than separation. So it's always really good for me. Thankfully, I have a safe place to land, and not everybody does. Where was I going with that? I don't know. Something about connection. See? Don't let me waffle.
No, I know you were making reference to, and I actually wanted to go back and ask the questions about some of the friendships you may have lost along the way. And I don't know, and if it comes back to mind, just jump in. I think that's where my fear is. I've literally just put something today, putting a petition up on critical race theory being in schools. And I know that's an American term, and we say, why are we following America? But I've just kind of had it with some of the conversations that are happening with my daughter at school. It's actually got to the point that I've reached the level of, oh, we'll get over it. I'm actually now like, let's do something about it. But there is a fear of someone saying, you're doing this again. This happened years ago. Let's move on, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm really intrigued at this level. The friends, I'm intrigued in the psychology. What trauma have they been through that has them struggle with the identity of you coming back to who you really are?
I feel it's the fear. So it's exactly that. Thank you, because it did bring me back to what I was going to say. I've found, because I find people fascinating, and I want to be with them, but I also want to be as far away as possible. And I'm it's a bit difficult. Just need a lot of time to regroup. But I feel like it is the fear. And how often can we not sit with our discomfort? That something happens and it's like, oh, I don't like that person. Well, you probably don't not like them. Well, you might not, but you're uncomfortable. You're just not aware that you're uncomfortable, and you're going to make it about them being a twit than you being uncomfortable. Yeah, I quickly changed the word. Sorry. I was like, it's being recorded. You can't say that.
Your mouth.
No, I like the word
twit. You're in good hands here, but I don't know. Keep going.
But, it was like, so I find it comes back to, like, I guess it is like a gaslighting thing, which has been one of my core things all the way through my life, having to manage that, my response to it, what I bring from others as well. Like, how do I draw that? But also, what am I doing? What am I not understanding about me? all that aside, as well, sometimes people are being that because of their discomfort. They're not sitting, and it is uncomfortable when someone changes or they get a degree or they get a pay rise and they end up earning 300 grand a year and they go out to restaurants that you can't afford. So it is your discomfort. It doesn't matter what it is. You go putting a cultural thing in there, well, then they don't know how to talk to you and you correct them. And again, it might not be eloquently or even skillfully, but you're still figuring it out. And sometimes they're just like, well, it was fine before. So it actually wasn't fine before. I just wasn't confident enough to speak to you about it. It's never been fine. And people's like, oh, well, you've changed. So I actually haven't. I'm just becoming more of who I'm meant to be. And I was never allowed. And that's something you can't understand because this has never been taken from you. And I'm not going to be quiet to make you comfortable. I'll talk to you about it and I'll work with you about it. And I'll go off and I'll see someone if I need to manage my anger, which I'm still working on because I do get quite angry. And then I feel hurt, which is usually what's under it. But it's hard to sit with that. So I get it. But why can't we talk about it? And then it becomes, you're doing this. And then the labels come. And then you either have to fight or walk away. And sometimes it's exhausting because you're fighting for identity all the time. And all you're doing is being who you are. And generally, I found the discomfort often is people ask you questions of what they want to know. But when you tell them what you want to share, culturally, it's not enough. And then they'll go, well, yeah, but your culture's fractured. And why is that?
Wow.
It is fractured, but why is that? And you're not looking at what it is. Like, it's one of the most beautiful and strong cultures that I've ever had the privilege of being in. To sit with an elder on country, I was just, again, crying. And it was because it was beautiful. And I was told when I came back, it was a few years ago, 2 years, I think, I met one of my cousins who we're publishing a book in the new year. So I'm looking forward to that. Jodie's an artist and she's just an amazing human. She's just one of my missing pieces. So she said, oh, there's a healing thing. You've got to come up, cuz. Like, come up. It's a healing for women on country. And I was excited and packing it at the same time. I was like, oh, my God, I can't wait. And I was all hot. I was like, what do I wear? What do I do? And it was so overwhelming to go because it's that, yay, holy shit. You get in there and the women were just so amazing. They were welcoming. One of the aunties walked straight over and she goes, welcome, sis. And she threw her arms around me and I lost it. I was like, oh, well, there's the tone for the day. I spent most of the day with the women. I had to keep walking away because it was just so powerful being on country. And once they put the ochre on, I couldn't speak. Like, I'd been welcomed traditionally by our women on our country and I couldn't talk. It was about 10 minutes. And my cousin did say to me, it's a really powerful process. Just be ready to sit with it. And I'm like, I've done heaps of healing and there's your arrogance, but we've all got it. So it's not a competition. I'll be fine. I wasn't fine. I was, but it took me days to be okay and integrate some of that. And it was really months. And from there, things just changed profoundly and quickly. The work scenarios changed. And people don't understand that when they ask you to be, oh, well, you're Indigenous, you come and do this thing. Sure. But it's also very personal because you're bringing who you are. It's not just a title. So I'm not just a case manager. I'm not coming as a case manager where you can take that hat off. You're coming as an Indigenous, whatever they've asked you to come as. So it is a very personal and exposing thing and it's raw. And it's real because you live it every day. You don't go home and take your hat off. It's happening all of the time. So I guess the combos about that kind of stuff would be great. Just gently bringing people to an awareness of just because you Google something, that doesn't mean it's cultural. Just because you want to know, that doesn't mean it's your right to have an answer. I've asked elders things and they've just smiled at me and walked away. I still don't know because it's not about that. And it's never done in a way that's rude. It's done in a way that's And I did say to one, I said, Uncle, can I ask you a question? He said, love, you can always ask. It's like, oh, that means no already. And they're very gracious and joyful and stuff about it. But it isn't, it's about sitting and listening and being present and being respectful and bringing more of that through. And you've got to clear your old stuff out to bring more of it in. So it's going to be a bit messy and it's a hard road. And it's often, I've been more isolated now than I was when I came out as gay. And I thought that was hard. That was nothing. It's just,
Right.
yeah, this is a lot harder.
Yeah, wow, okay.
So some people we don't even speak anymore. And I've needed to just accept that because that's how it is.
Yeah.
It's more important to be this and to be who I am and to be with my family. And it's kind of like a little bit of defiance in a way that I will have my voice because my mother didn't. My grandmother didn't. They were never allowed. And that stops now.
Has your purpose, mission in life become clearer as a result of these findings of returning back to self? And how so? Like if I was to ask you what your mission is or your purpose is it clearer now than it ever has been?
It is clearer. I've always felt it has been to speak for the underdog, those who don't get a seat. Doesn't matter who it is. I don't care. I've often defended men with DV situations or like, I don't care what it is. But it has been that and it has become clearer. It's more about the voice and the connection and the power in that. And healing isn't what people think. I do get so frustrated and people say, oh, the transgenerational trauma in the Aboriginal community. Yeah, it's massive. Huge suicide issues, huge drug and alcohol, docs involvement, the whole gamut. Like it's not happening. We know it's happening. But what about the positive things that are happening? And the healing is sacred. It's done on country. It's not a stat. You can't measure it. And it's done in a way that's sacred and private. So I'm interested in what people are going to do about that rather than writing their big-ass reports and like, this is what's needed. Ask the community what that community needs. Go and sit with an elder and ask if you can come on country and work with them and create programs with that community for what they need because it is happening. It's not happening on the levels that it could happen, but it is there.
Oh.
I've got such a passion for that,
Yeah, I was with an elder up in the Northern Territory and he said to me, I hear people say that we need to heal the country or we need to heal the planet. And he laughed. He said, it makes me laugh. Country heals you.
It does. I can't wait. And the first time it came out of my mouth, I was like, oh, I don't usually say that. But it's more and more, like I'm feeling more comfy with it. And it totally is. And it's like, I've just got to get out on country. And as often as I can, I go out.
Yeah.
And I'll be with friends or whatever, but I love going out with my cousin. We usually have the most profound times. We always get lost. It's like, how are you've lived here forever. How are we getting lost? But it's always an adventure. And I think, you go where you're meant to go anyway, and the roads are blocked or something's flooded or something always happens, which is hilarious. But we have the most joyous time and it's usually so profound. And what comes, you can hear the ancestors speaking when you're there. You get your feet out in the dirt and you sit there and you can just feel it. It comes across you. And it's such a powerful, powerful thing. And you just rest in that. Like, it's not what we perceive it to be. If you're in your heart and you do merge with the country, that is the mother. And that's how it happens. And generally, it's private. And you can, whether you're Indigenous or not, it doesn't matter. If you're with someone, like how many people would say, I'm going to go for a walk in nature and I feel better?
Yeah.
I'm going to go for a swim in the ocean.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Yeah.
But it's just more of an intent. And I think it's great if anyone could experience that and they want to, proper way, respectfully with the elders or with the community, and ask to go and sit and how, and just be there and weave something and make something and listen to people and share and understand that the proper way is still alive and it still happens, but no one's seeing that. And we're getting the reports of all the other stuff that is wrong, not what is right.
And if somebody watching this had a calling of the felt like I want to do that, I want to go and sit with elders, how would they find the right people? How would they do that in their area?
I guess it would be just asking. Like sometimes the land councils are a good place to start.
Yeah.
Or who are the local people? Check with your local people, and if you don't know, ask someone who you are comfortable with to ask a question, even if it's not articulate, because that's often the fear. Like, don't let that stop you. Find someone who you're comfy with to help connect with someone who could help you connect with someone else.
Yeah.
And just do it quietly, do it graciously, and the right people often come up. It's a really beautiful experience, and if it's done with respect and curiosity, with no expectation that you're going to get, but you're going to give. Like that's, if we give first, then you receive. And it's not about financial gain or anything. It's you give respect first. And you ask I'd love to come and sit with you, can I come? And you're then giving something to them, and they'll let you know when. And it needs to be the right time, like anything. It's like if you have a spiritual teacher, they're not going to say yes to everything. It's about the right time. Yeah, I highly recommend it to everybody. It's a really beautiful experience.
Well, I have to say this has been profound for me. You've given me confidence because they're questions I want to ask. And I'm hoping those that are listening, they do the same. You've just given that, it's that gracious, and I guess for me, being African and having lived in Nigeria and still being very close to my culture, that's all you ever do with elders is there's respect, and that's regardless of culture. It's just what we do. Like, and I teach my kids, and so I feel like you brought me back home in this conversation. I feel like I can continue to extend what I'm calling home. And honestly, I'm hoping we get to talk again. I'll definitely be in touch with you. But this has been honestly a blessing like no other. I don't know how much Jen has shared about me, but there were some words you said, and I was like, wait, what? Is this like my twin sister, soul flame? And I know Jen said it'd be great, but honestly, you've mentioned things, and I don't think things are coincidences. Is what you've done is just reminded me to remember who I am and what I'm part of. I could really go off tangent here, but I think the Indigenous people of Australia, Aboriginals, the light and the beacon that the whole community has got to show the world really is a bigger mission and more possible sooner rather than later than ever before. And I feel this in my bones. I feel it's tied to a number of other Indigenous cultures. And I know Jen and I speak about the fact that sometimes we forget white people have ancestors, and we forget that they also go back a certain period, but they potentially are a race that has been away from it the longest, therefore they truly forget. As you can see, I can go on. I just want to say thank you for bringing this conversation to the forefront and for using your voice. So thank you.
I'm really grateful for the invitation was amazing. I didn't expect it. And it's, as usual, it's me seeing something that I was like, oh, here we go. What's that on there for? And then here we are. So it's always for a purpose.
Yeah.
And I really have to thank Jen for that, because she's always been someone who is approachable no matter what, and very gracious of like, oh, well, we need to do something with that.
Yeah.
Let's have a chat. So that isn't as common as I'd like, but it's really profound. So thank you both very much.
And what I really felt from this conversation is that I've been reading my grandmother's hands. Have either of you?
Yes,
yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's why I call the documentary Cleaning Our Trauma. He talks about cleaning trauma.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So I'm reading at the moment. I'm about sort of 6 chapters in. But he's talking about having these kinds of conversations and actually letting yourself feel it in your body. So like Yemi, how you did, how emotion came up for you, Mel, how, I felt stuff in my body. I also felt teary. I felt prickly when you talked about your grandma going back to her land. I could feel goosebumps all over me. And I think that like, I wonder sort of how much that these conversations are part of the healing process, that kind of us all being together with our totally different lineages, totally different heritages, but coming together with love and compassion in our bodies, kind of with that sort of somatic experience, with the rawness of the emotion. Like, I love it when you say, Mel, I just cry all the time, you know, because it's like, it's real, right? It's like, it's so real because you're feeling it. And I just love that kind of in this conversation here, we're in our own tent, you know, like this is the heart-based compassion, inquiring, you know, what's happening, what's working, what's not working, and really feeling it, you know, in the joy of the strength, but also in the pain of the hurt, you know, like all of it, you know.
Oh, I like that. The joy of the strength, the pain of the hurt. Love it.
It's so true. And it is the, and I think you're right with the conversations like this in these spaces. That's how the healing happens, because it's both like where we're living now. It's not just about the black versus white. Like, of course it still is, but there's more allies than not, I feel. And it's the fear of like being separate and finding that space to come together for everyone to heal together. That's how it happens. It's brave, it's courageous, it's messy, tears, all the stuff. And it's great. It is really nice having a safe space to land and hearing what other people think and what they want to know and how they feel, because it's not just one side. Yeah. I'd love to do it again. Not today, because I'm going to need a rest.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on and speaking to us, Mel. It's been very inspiring for both of us. So thank you, thank you. And feel free, those of you watching, to leave any comments, any questions that you have for Mel. Her contact details will be below the video, and take care of yourselves.